I see us as being in the hospitality business because, we are you're our guest, right? For an hour and a half, however long you're here. And it's our job to make sure that you have a really great time, that you feel special, that, we sort of tap all of those moments. And so I'm, really working with the team on that hospitality mindset.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. This is your backstage pass to the people, tools, and the trends shaping the future of content marketing.
And welcome to another episode of Content Kingdom in the Wild. And today I am with Stacy Moscatelli of OGX Productions. And Stacy, this one is a huge, exciting thing for me because tell us about what we're sitting on right now. What are we sitting on?
We're on the famous orange couch from Friends. And so, we're here in Central Perk, which is, a pretty iconic location in the series. Really, almost every episode ends in Central Perk. And so with that, the experience ends in Central Perk as well. So that's where we are.
Nice. And so we are in New York City in Central Perk at, what is this? This is 130 East 23rd Street, where you have the Friends experience. And I just have to say, I remember the first episode of Friends,
wow.
Going back. So
1994,
yeah. Fall of 94. The reason I remember it is I was playing college football. I got hurt and I was kind of laid up with my leg, elevated. And there at 8:30,
Must-See TV Thursday.
Must-See TV Thursday comes on. And there's the first episode of Friends. And so I've been with it for a long time. And so this is really great. I wanted to ask you, walk us through this immersive experience. I mean, why this and what's the reaction?
Oh, well, so we did a pop-up in 2019 and it was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the show, which felt really monumental.
Wow, 25 years.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh my gosh.
That was in 19.
Yeah.
So since then, we've
celebrated. And now I'm even older.
Exactly. And we, had a really small location down in Soho on Broadway, and the response was really overwhelming. And I think, we really saw what this show meant to its fans and how much they loved really kind of getting inside the world themselves. And I think, for a show like this, especially with that time, most people only interacted with the show on a screen, like you said, once a week on Thursdays, and then later, obviously, on reruns and various, streaming networks. But with that, people just really loved coming in and recreating, scenes and moments and sort of having this really great connection to the show and bringing that to the real world. And so that response was really strong. And then we started touring. And then we opened this in 2020, December of 2020, we started with previews and then opened in March of 21 was our grand opening. So we've been in this location for almost 5 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And so this is an actual functioning coffee shop as well as a place where you can have an immersive experience. Is that correct? Yeah.
We've got coffee, drinks, and pastries, and you can, come through the experience and then have your Central Perk time, or you can just come in off the street and grab a cup of coffee.
And, walk me through this because this is rather unique. Very few things can you go and experience and sit on the couch and have this feeling. When did you get this idea that something like this would be attractive to people?
Well, I think it was really with that 25th anniversary. So we had been working with Warner Brothers on a couple of other projects. And then they said, we really want to find a unique way to celebrate the 25th anniversary. Would you be open to doing a pop-up with us? And so once we did that, we sort of caught the bug, so to speak, and really, like I said, just saw the fan reaction and decided, let's do more of these. So we started touring the experience, and then, the flagship opportunity opened up, and this was a really great location. It had sort of the right square footage, and we thought Friends really, in the series of Friends, New York is kind of the seventh character. Mm-hmm. And so having a permanent location in New York makes a lot of sense for people to be able to come and have their Friends experience.
Now, that's rather thoughtful that you've thought about New York. You have the coffee shop, you've got the couch. By the way, I wonder, where was the couch between the last episode of the last season and when you picked it up? Did they just save these things? I'm surprised that they weren't just oh, it's a couch, get rid of it. But
it's really interesting. So we worked with the Warner Brothers Archives team. And so we've got a lot of original original props and costumes that are downstairs. And it's in this really beautiful art display. But Warner Brothers, I think, just really saw the power of Friends and archived just a number of items. So everything from, Emma's baby bracelet from the hospital. We've got their wallets and IDs. There's all this fun stuff downstairs to kind of uncover whether, like I said, it's a costume or a prop. And so we just got lucky. I think that it was such a big hit at Warner Brothers that they kept, meticulous notes and saved a lot of the items for us. And then, since then we have some recreations. They're not all original, obviously, like you said, to keep this couch for that long, it would be a lot, especially with all the seatings we have on any given day. So now we sort of have a corner market on orange velvet couches that we produce every year.
So OGX this isn't your only one hit. And so you've kind of turned this nostalgia into a business. And I'm wondering if you could tell us, like, what's the formula there?
Yeah, I mean, I always try not to have too much of a formula because I think once you're in the formula business, it gets a little less interesting.
You lose the authenticity.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it's really about understanding fandoms is, something that I've spent my whole career just really excited about. I started at Adult Swim back in the day. And so fandom and being in person with fans was just really core to what that brand was. And it just always showed me the power of that. I hate saying IRL, it dates me, but that, that IRL experience, because it's just super powerful as a brand to have that connection. And so that was sort of always at the core of it, was just that fan connection and that fandom. Friends is obviously super unique because it had it was a pop culture phenomenon that reached, every corner of the globe. It was dubbed in, I don't even know, there's some wall that tells me how many languages it was dubbed in. But it just sort of had this captivating power, and it has had staying power in a way that a lot of shows don't. So for us, it's been kind of finding, like, what are these fandoms? What are these shows that just people have this connection to, where they quote it, they want to be in the scenes, they love the sets that feel so iconic to them and feel so real. So we had the Office experience that we operated for several markets. That was really great. It was one of my favorites. It was, you could literally just be in the office and sit at everyone's desk.
Amazing.
And just finding those layers of how do you sort of deepen the experience, and how do you, get fans kind of even more immersed in it. So, it really is just, who's the fan? What do they want from the experience? And how do we just keep layering that on more and more and more so that they leave really feeling like they had just the Friends experience they were hoping for?
Got it. And so you've touched on another one, which is The Office. So, so you could go and you could have an immersive experience where you were in the office. I don't know if you could actually open Stanley's crossword puzzle and
yes.
Yeah, you could.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Amazing.
You could open, Dwight's drawer and see the Jell-O stapler.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and then,
so much fun.
We had their files. So that one was really fun. We were able to work with some of the show talent. And so we were able to sort of write a little bit of a story that layered on a different, fan experience that was just really interesting and cool for fans. So, similar in that you had the photo ops, but it was just a little bit more of a deep dive where you could, open every drawer and, every cabinet. We had the Office kitchen.
Oh, incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you had the Office experience. And then in addition to that, you've got a Harry Potter experience that you have as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah. So that experience is called Magic at Play. And that was the goal. Was about really thinking about how do you connect with that younger Harry Potter fan. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an older, IP. And so we really wanted to think about what are some of the playful sides of that brand and that entertainment opportunity. And so we started to bring that to life. So that was really interesting. And then most recently we launched a Hershey experience, which I don't know if you are familiar with.
Well, that one I wanted to dive into because the other three, there's books, TVs, and movies. And so that makes, sense to me. It's like, okay, I see the thread, I see the arc between those. Hershey's a little bit different because it's obviously a set of candy and it's a consumer brand that we all love, but it's not the same. So tell us about that one and why does that fit with all the rest? Yeah,
I mean, that is what made it interesting, right? Mm-hmm. It's sort of easy to take a story or take something that exists in the world and recreate it in a way that, you remember it. But for Hershey, we were able to create our own story and bring a narrative to life that didn't exist before. Mm-hmm. And so that is challenging for sure. But I think it's just also an interesting twist on an experience that sets a different expectation. And so, I was really excited by the portfolio of brands. We leverage, primarily today only the sweet side of the portfolio, but Hershey has a whole salty side of things as well.
That's true.
And so, we worked with their team to create this narrative about, sweet seekers. And it's also, kind of skews a little younger, kind of a play experience, and just brings the brands to life in a way that is, fun and silly. And then obviously, of course, candy. But to your point, I think what ties everything together is about creating this narrative, creating this experience, really bringing people in and creating this world that is, unique from their day to day. And then, bringing that to life in a way that they weren't, some of what they expected and some of what they weren't expecting. And so, Hershey is such a major brand. You talk a lot about nostalgia, and I think that, we all grew up with Hershey. Everybody has a Hershey candy memory of, going to grandma's house or going trick-or-treating or whatever it is. What's your favorite? Is it a Reese's? Is it a York peppermint patty? It goes on and on. But one of the things that we thought was really fun about Hershey is that all of their brands are about sharing. And so what a cool opportunity to create a shared experience, And so if you really start to think about it, there's never just one, right? Two Reese's, Kit Kat, you split, you share.
Yeah.
Kisses, you never just get a single kiss, right? It's usually a pack of kisses. And so, Twizzlers, same thing, share it. And so we kept thinking about how do we create a shared experience that sort of brings that to life. And I think it's one of those things you don't consciously think about when you're eating a Hershey candy. But when you start to think about your memories of, your friends, your brothers, your sisters, trick-or-treating, doing that trading and all of that, like there is this moment that you're sharing and this memory that you're sharing. And so it was about how, we could bring that to life and create new mememories.
Stacy, you just blew my mind with the sharing thing. Because now
you'll never unsee it.
It's like, when you watch the movie The Sixth Sense and all of a sudden you realize, there's this big, huge plot twist. I just feel like Hershey's, it's like, surprise, you've been sharing it the whole time.
You never ate the whole candy bar.
I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all about sharing. So that's incredible. And that's a really cool part of the story. So walk me through the business of OGX. So you guys do this, right? And you create these experiences. And so who's your customer? And, how do you work with them before you get to the consumer part, which is, the really fun part?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all comes back to our guest at the end of the day and sort of, the fan. But for us, we license the brands from the brands. So we license the IP. So we'll work with a Warner Brothers, with a Hershey. Sometimes they're all structured a little bit different. Sometimes it's their licensing team. Some have global themed entertainment teams. So we work with them, do a deal for a license, and then together create the experience. And some, like you said, some Friends was a little bit obvious. We knew what all the hits were, and we had the benefit of the pop-up. So we were able to ask, what more do you want? And people wanted more of this. They wanted the hallway between the apartments. And so with that, we were able to scale the experience to be a more permanent location. But yeah, we work really closely with our partners at the IP side, of the brand side of things. And then, I think what we all try to bring everything back to is the guest. It's easy to sort of put yourself as like, I'm a fan of Friends, but also, spending a lot of time talking to fans and just, what I love to do is I love to come here on any given day and just watch everybody go through, and watch the joy and the faces. So, one of the things with our partners is always bringing it back to the guest. What would the guest expect? What makes the guest smile? It's easy to get caught up in the details and the weeds and all the legalities of everything. But I think when you're dealing with an experience, you need to just think about what makes people smile and what, brings back a memory for them.
Yeah. And, I think what I find really interesting about your business is now that I've kind of experienced it and kind of heard this story, I'm thinking, well, what are those brands that we just love? And I'm thinking of myself first, right? And so brands that I love, it's like, well, Harley Davidson, like what would a Harley Davidson experience look like? Or, Disney, of course, does this pretty well on their own, but, there's Disney and just so many other things, BMW to go to something in Europe. So, when you think about, what is kind of like next for you, like what are your thoughts? And I think for a lot of just to make this question even longer, I think for a lot of the CMOs who listen to this podcast, who are thinking, hey, I have a pretty exciting brand. Like what should somebody be looking for in something that would make for a great immersive experience like this? Yeah,
I mean, to your point, I think it starts with, is there a fandom, right? And what is that fandom? What level? How do they want to experience the brand beyond the item or the product itself. And what's the scale of that? We've been shifting from touring to more permanent locations. It just makes a lot of sense. And so with that, it's a quality over quantity play for us. We're not doing pop-ups anymore.
Okay.
And, never say never. If there's the right opportunity to sort of beta test something, we will. And, we kind of did that with Hershey, where we started in Chicago. We kind of said, let's see how the audience experiences this. Let's learn and then go from there. So I keep saying that one's still in beta, but we're moving it to a new location and, tweaking it now for V2. Okay. But in terms of what we look for, it is just about what is the size and scale of the fandom? What is the passion level of the fandom? Will they buy a ticket? Do they care that much to buy a ticket? And then do we think that creatively we can bring something to life that is meaningful and sort of has enough density, for lack of a better word, where there's an actual experience there. It's not just a photo op. It's not just, a quick 20 minutes where you're, playing with a screen. How do we think about creating an experience that we think can last 45 minutes to an hour, that has sort of all of these layers of engagement that make it really special, that you walk away feeling like it was worthwhile?
It seems to me like there's a real power of story in everything that you do. And so the Hershey sharing, for example, seems to be a big part of that. So do you guys help people with that and help them craft story as you think about, what to do with some of this IP?
Yeah. I mean, it's all, everyone's a little bit different, right? And sort of what they're, like you said, Hershey, on the surface, you think, Hershey doesn't have a story, but Hershey has Hershey Park. They've got Chocolate World in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Sure.
They've created experiences. They're a little bit more retail driven than our experience, but, obviously we've got a retail component too. So I think it is about working with a partner and figuring out what are those elements to draw out and really hone in on. And, sometimes that seems really obvious and easy. And sometimes it's a little bit more complicated and sort of requires a little bit more of a push and a pull with our partner. And then, sometimes it depends on who we're working with. In some cases, we have the benefit of working with a creative on the brand side. And then in some cases, we're working with a licensing person who's kind of like, I'll know it when I see it.
Right. Yeah.
And, there's freedom in that, but there's also, it's a trap.
Yeah. I mean, the story is always obvious after it's told,
of course,
right? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. But that's the fun part. It's, I think you and I were talking about this, but if not, it's a question I get asked all the time, but it takes about a year, from the time we're like, let's get into this, minimum it takes a year, because you're not only creating a story, you're also building the elements and getting the brand right. But then also real estate's a really big component to our business. And so finding the right location is everything. And so there's all of these layers. So, it takes at least a year, but I mean, I'm trying to think if our partners would call me out, because it's probably in most recent cases been a little bit more than that. But, I think our big thing is it's got to be a brand that can stand the test of time. So if you're on some timeline that this needs to happen in 6 months, we're probably not your partner, because just rushing it is just not a recipe for success. And so really thinking about, how do we get the story right? How do we all feel really good about the experience we're creating? As much as I'm a type A and like to hit a deadline, I also like to give that flexibility to make sure that we're getting it right versus getting it done.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking with a client yesterday myself, and we were talking about, we never have enough time to get it done, but we always have time to do it over again later. And it's like, why are we doing this? Yeah. So if that's we're in the mindset, probably not for you. But you bring up an interesting point, because as I'm thinking about this, my mind is exploding with all these different ideas of what would be a really cool immersive experience, because it's so fun. And I'm thinking Stephen King world, but who wants to go up to Maine to go to Stephen King world? I've never been to Maine, I'd probably go for Stephen King world, but yeah, then trying to find the real estate. And it sounds like there's a lot of logistics that goes into it before you get to the power of story.
Yes.
So let's pivot for a minute and talk about the fact that you have this
intended pun? Pivot?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to pivot for a minute and talk about the idea that you've got this amazing content, right? And so you've got this immersive experience. And so when you're promoting this and trying to get it out there, walk me through your ability to use the content that you have to do content marketing. Can you use the Friends song, for example? Can you, use clips from the show when you're doing things on social media? Walk me through, how do you guys use this content to make people aware of the immersive experience?
Yeah. So, it depends on sort of the life cycle. The hardest stage is before it's built,
Mhm.
but you're trying to sell tickets before doors open.
Yeah.
That's always the window where you're like, what do we do? I can't show you the experience, so I have to try to find a creative way to tell you.
Mhm.
And so that's always the window that I would say is just the most challenging, is trying to figure out, what to do in that scenario. Friends has been open here for a long time. We just opened in Las Vegas as well. And so, sometimes it's also just working with content creators that it's like, I don't need to tell the story. I can work with somebody who's really great at storytelling and who, whether that's an influencer or a content creator who does this,
Like a
and kind of
podcast.
goes through,
Yeah.
or a podcast. Exactly. So that's always a great way. I think, for me, like I said, it's always the guest. So showing it through the guest point of view is always really important to me, because I think it is just the more genuine, true version of the experience versus through my lens as a marketer and the person who created it. So I think we're always trying to find that way to show it through the lens of the guest, and show it through, their moments of surprise and delight and sort of what they'll expect to see. We do sometimes use content. One of the things that the campaigns for Friends in particular that I always love is showing the characters in the scene and then showing guests in the scene.
Oh,
and
neat.
people always really love that, because it's like, oh wait, they all sat here and now I can sit here. That's cool. And just to kind of show that. But really, we really try to showcase the experience versus the show, because you already know and love the show.
Right.
And so how are we showing you how you're engaging with it?
Okay.
And so, we do have the ability to leverage different assets from the brand, but we're also careful not to overuse that, so that it doesn't feel like we're selling Friends, but we're selling the Friends experience.
Good point.
Mhm.
Good point. And then with all of these, there's been a kind of an explosion recently of virtual reality technology, augmented reality technology. Are you playing with that and exploring with it, or is that on the horizon? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's one of those, it's really sexy in a lot of ways right now. And I think in the world that we live in, it's important to not just do sort of that token overlay and to really think about why does it work here? What makes it make sense? We struggle a little bit with Friends because part of the appeal is like you're going back into the 90s.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
it is about nostalgia. And so bringing in something, high tech would feel, it would need to be done so well that it really is about bringing you back into that time frame versus accelerating you forward. So we, with that one, we're always very careful. We've had a lot of conversations. I think we have some ideas about how we might do that someday, but we haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. But with other experiences, it might make more sense and it might be a little bit easier to pull off. But I think, for me, digital for the sake of it is sort of, it's not just for the press release. It has to be, how does it enhance the experience? How does it make it better for the guest versus feeling like a one-trick pony? So I think it's hard to execute. And I think, I've seen, through the past, I would say 6-7 years, seen some people come in with like AR, VR that's like doing it for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And it feels old really quickly.
Yeah.
So I think it is just about being really thoughtful with it and finding out, like, coming back to the why, how does it make the guest experience better?
Yeah.
And just making sure that that's at the core. So, we haven't really dabbled in it. Like I said, we've explored what that could look like, but I don't know. I still think Friends it's all about the 90s. And I think that's part of the charm.
You're another mind-blowing thing. Yeah. They didn't even have iPods in
Cell
Friends
phones.
or cell phones at all.
Yeah.
My gosh. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And, I think you're right about the authenticity part of that, right?
Mhm.
Is that when you go to some, museum and they have a VR experience, if it's not done well, it feels super gimmicky.
Yes.
And I'm glad to hear that, like, yeah, you're not tarnishing the experience with something that's got
Yeah.
gimmick in it.
But I think there's a way to do it. I've seen it well done. It's just being, like I said, thoughtful.
Okay. If you had unlimited resources to go
gosh.
do your favorite fandom thing that's for you, what would you go do?
Gosh, I don't know. It's hard to separate sort of the business side of it from sort of having that level of freedom. I think it would be something probably in the food space. I'm a foodie at heart.
Okay.
And so I think food and travel would probably come to mind. We haven't gotten into this, but at the end of the day, I see us as being in the hospitality business.
Oh, okay.
because, we are you're our guest, right? For an hour and a half, however long you're here. And it's our job to make sure that you have a really great time, that you feel special, that, we sort of tap all of those moments. And so I'm, really working with the team on that hospitality mindset. And I think that a lot of times we associate that with food experiences or travel experiences, but any experience should be a hospitality experience. And so, for me, I'm really passionate about that. I think that customer service and that guest mentality can change everything, right? Even if you have a bad experience at a restaurant, if they make it right, it can change your perception. You'll tell everybody about how they made it right. Exactly. And so, so I think for me, I would probably do something food related.
Okay. Any particular kind of food? I
don't know. I don't think it would be IP driven so much. I think it would just be a little bit of just like a different experience of food, and sort of just a really curated, intimate experience. I think that a lot of times, when a restaurant sort of hype it, a lot of, it's busy, it's hard to get a reservation. Like some of the sort of surrounding aspects of getting into that restaurant are really difficult. Okay. And so I think it's, how do you sort of open up the doors, but still keep it intimate and reduce the friction? I think that's something for the industry that's really interesting, to consider across hospitality in general is, I can control what happens when you walk in the door, but how are we thinking about the before and the after? And how are we extending the experience and making sure that customer service comes through from like the time you get to the website to the time, you get a thank you email at home? And how are we thinking about extending that customer service experience? So sorry to throw the hospitality thing in. We didn't talk about that before.
I mean, I was thinking that like when you first said it, I was like, where's she going with this? Is this going to be like a Silence of the Lambs kind of thing where you're like fava beans and Chianti? And I'd be like, So anyway, way healthier than where I thought we were going. So, all right. So if you could sit in any other iconic TV or movie set,
oh gosh,
where would you want to go?
I mean, Breaking Bad is one of my favorite shows of all time. But
the trailer, gonna go hang in Walter White's trailer?
But the experience would be interesting, right? Yeah. But, it's such an amazing television show. And I think it's so, the New Mexico of it all is so iconic that you almost can't unsee that. I don't know that it would leave you feeling warm and fuzzy. No. Hang out. But I love the show and I would love to engage with it in a different way. I think it also, for a lot of people, it sort of plays out this like fantasy of like, what would the bad version of me look like? And so I think that there's something kind of fun about that. So I think that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know how viable it is as a business, but.
Well, I could just imagine that like you have drinks in like an ice bucket, only the ice is blue and you're just sitting there. Everyone's calling you Heisenberg and you're having a great time.
It could be fun. What about you?
For me, okay, so I'm going to just totally drop my veneer and say that behind the scenes, I'm a huge book nerd.
Oh, okay, me too.
So Stephen King world, I already threw down for that. That would be incredible. The other one that I'm actually doing a teaser of is I'm exploring Brandon Sanderson's conference. So he's a science fiction, sci-fi writer, and my daughter and I are huge fans. So we're going to his conference in Utah in December with like 3,000 other people, and it sold out in like 2 minutes.
Wow.
So so I have no idea what we're really doing. I talked to some friends and their kids into going, and they're like, so what are we doing at this trade show? And I'm like, I have no idea.
We'll find out together.
But it's all going to be about the books we like. So we're going to go do that.
It's interesting. I think I've sort of, in the back of my head, I think that there could be something really interesting about getting a publishing IP that has not yet made it to the screen. Yeah. And thinking about creating an experience from a book and from a story that exists. It's hard because when you read a book, how you envision things and how I envision things could be very, very different. And so bringing something to life that sort of fulfills both of our expectations is hard. But I think there's something really interesting about taking something that I don't already know what it looks like and bringing it to life. So I would love to work with an author and bring a story and create an experience around a book.
Well, when I meet Brandon Sanderson, I'll name drop your name and see what we can come up with. So that'll be great. Stacy, this has been a tremendous episode. And so thank you so much for all of this. You. When you think about, the future for OGX, what's really on your mind? That's kind of is my French goodbye question.
So much is on my mind. I think we're always looking at what's the next opportunity and what's the next IP. As I mentioned, we recently opened the Friends Experience in Las Vegas, and that's been really interesting. It's such a different market and a different kind of guest. We're opening a phase 2 of that experience next year in Q1. And so that'll have some different layers unique to any of our Friends experiences. So keep an eye out for that. So we're focused on getting, Vegas up and running and getting that right. And then the team's always thinking about what's next, right? And I think, for me, like I mentioned, there's sort of this book idea in my head, and I don't know exactly what the right world is to bring to life, but I'm always kind of thinking about that. And then, creating our own IP someday, I think would be really exciting. I think it would be also really liberating, to sort of have no sort of partner approvals and just kind of move things forward. But I think it's also the constraints of an IP also are helpful at times. So for me, it would be about us expanding into new IP, new genres. You talked a little bit about sci-fi, I think sports, part of, like I said, the appeal of Hershey was that it was different and it challenged our team in different ways. And so I'm kind of, what's next? I think TV is easy. And I say that knowing it's not. We created this experience. But, how do we sort of keep challenging ourselves, looking at different opportunities to create experiences like sports, like Harley Davidson, like you mentioned? What are some of these other brands that I think would benefit from engaging with their guests in a different way?
Amazing. Stacy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coffee, wine, whiskey.
All of them.
All of them?
They all have different places, right? In the morning, I want my coffee. In the evening, I want my wine. And then a little later, I want my whiskey.
Drones. Love them or hate them?
Hate them. It might just be because my husband's lost 4 of them.
Okay.
It seems like this thing we spend money on and then hits a tree, gets stuck in a tree.
Favorite book?
The Power of One.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever read that?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Great book.
It's a really great book.
Favorite childhood toy?
I think it was my little brother. Like I thought he was a doll. Like I thought he was like for me to play with, and he'll kill me if he ever heard me say this. But I would try to do his hair, and I thought he was like I could put makeup on him. I got in trouble all the time for that. But I think he was my favorite toy.
How many years separate you and your
5
brother?
years.
5 years.
5
All right.
years,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's definitely enough time to be able to do that. Favorite social media platform?
Instagram.
Mm-hmm. All right.
What's your favorite?
I'd have to say it's LinkedIn.
Do you think it's fun though? I feel like LinkedIn has gotten a little.
I kind of get pulled in.
Are we recording?
Yeah, we're still recording, but no,
I'm just kidding.